My name is Simone Archer. I am 36 years old. And when I was 11 years old, my parents sat me down at the kitchen table on a Tuesday evening in March and told me they were getting a divorce. I remember the specific details of that evening with the clarity that children reserve for moments that reorganize everything that comes after. The kitchen table had a crack in one corner that my father had been meaning to fix for 2 years. My mother was wearing a blue cardigan I had always loved. The overhead light was too bright for the conversation that was happening underneath it. They told me it was not my fault. They told me they both loved me completely. They told me that things would be different, but that different did not mean worse. They were wrong about that last part. Not immediately. Not in the obvious ways that divorce can be destructive, but in the specific way that happens when two people who have decided they are done with each other forget, in the business of building their separate new lives, that the child who sat at that kitchen table is still sitting somewhere waiting for one of them to look up. What happened over the next 25 years? What they both came back needing. And what I said when I understood that they were asking me for the same thing, is the story I want to tell you today. If you are new here, please subscribe right now and drop your country and local time in the comments. I read every single one. Now let me take you all the way back to the beginning. My parents were married for 13 years before the divorce. By the accounts of everyone who knew them, they had been genuinely happy for at least 8 of those years. The last 5 were harder in ways that children sense without being told, the particular tension of two people who have stopped choosing each other but have not yet decided what to do about it. My father's name is Gerald. My mother's name is Patricia. They were both good people. I want to be clear about that because this is not a story about bad parents. It is a story about people who were so consumed by the work of ending one chapter that they did not notice what they were doing to the person they had written into the middle of it. The divorce itself was relatively civil. They divided the house, the finances, and the schedule with the help of a mediator and 2 lawyers in a system that felt very organized from the outside and absolutely devastating from the inside of an 11-year-old who had understood, from the moment the mediator mentioned schedule, that her parents had stopped thinking of themselves as a unit and started thinking of themselves as individuals with obligations. She was the obligation. I say that not with bitterness. I have spent many years and a significant amount of therapy arriving at a place where I can say it factually and without the charge that used to come with it. I was the obligation. The thing they had made together that neither of them was willing to abandon, but that neither of them had the bandwidth, in the rebuilding of their individual lives, to fully choose. My father remarried first. 3 years after the divorce. A woman named Donna who had 2 children of her own from a previous marriage. My father adored Donna. I could see it immediately, and I want to be honest that I did not resent Donna for it. She was warm to me. She was not unkind. She was simply, already a complete picture. She and her children and my father formed a family that had its own gravity and its own interior life, and I was someone who visited it on alternating weekends and selected holidays. I watched my father become a stepfather. He was good at it. Present, involved, at every school event and soccer game and dinner table conversation. He was the father to Donna's children that I had not experienced from him in the years since the divorce. I noted this with the careful, quiet attention of a child who has learned that the adults in her life are doing the best they can and that their best sometimes does not include her. My mother remarried 4 years after the divorce. A man named Robert who had no children and a very clear preference for keeping it that way. My mother loved Robert in the specific way of someone who had decided she was done with a certain kind of life and wanted something quieter and more self-contained. Robert was polite to me. Cordial. The kind of cordial that communicates clearly that you are welcome to visit and equally welcome to leave. I visited my mother and Robert on alternating weekends and selected holidays. I spent the years between 11 and 18 moving between 2 houses that were not quite mine in a way that I managed by becoming very self-sufficient very early. I cooked my own meals when no one was available to cook. I managed my own school schedule, my own extracurricular activities, my own social life. I learned to not need things from people who were not positioned to provide them. I was a good student. I was quiet. I was competent. I was the kind of child that parents and teachers described as mature for her age, which is a phrase that often means a child who has stopped asking for what she needs because the asking has not been working. I graduated high school with honors. I received a partial scholarship to a university in North Carolina. I left home at 18 and I did not feel the loss of leaving in the way that I had watched friends feel it. I felt the absence of feeling that loss, which was its own particular thing to sit with. University was where I began to understand myself for the first time. Not in a dramatic way. Not a single transformative moment. Just the slow accumulation of being in an environment where I was seen on my own terms for the first time in my life. Professors who engaged with my thinking. Friends who chose me without obligation. A counselor at the university health center I started seeing in my second year who was the first adult in my life who asked about my childhood with genuine curiosity rather than defensive justification. I graduated with a degree in psychology. I went on to get a master's degree in social work. I built a career as a family therapist, which people find either ironic or completely logical depending on how they think about such things. I think it is completely logical. The people who have been the most shaped by family dynamics are often the ones most equipped to help others navigate theirs. Not because their own experience gives them answers, but because it gives them a particular quality of listening. I built a life in Durham, North Carolina. A small practice. A close group of friends. A partner named Marcus who was patient and genuinely kind and who understood from early in our relationship that I carried certain things carefully and needed space to do so. I was in contact with both of my parents throughout my adult years. Not regularly. Not with the intimacy of a close family. But consistently. Birthday calls. Occasional visits. The maintenance of a relationship that had never been rebuilt after the divorce but that had also never been entirely severed. My father called every few weeks. Cheerful, surface-level calls about his life, Donna's children, the house renovations he was always in the middle of. He asked about my work in the general way of someone who is proud without being particularly curious. My mother called less often. More formal. Updates about Robert, about the neighborhood, about her book club. She asked about my life in the specific way of someone checking a box. I received these calls and gave them what they were asking for and got off the phone and went back to my actual life. This continued for years. And then, within 7 months of each other, something shifted. My father called me on a Thursday afternoon in October when I was 34. He did not begin with the usual cheerfulness. He was quiet in a way that told me immediately something was different. He told me that Donna had been diagnosed with early-stage Alzheimer's disease. I expressed my sympathy. I meant it. Whatever my complicated feelings about my father's marriage, I had nothing but warmth for Donna and genuine sadness for what her family was facing. Then my father said something that I had not expected. He said, "Simone, I want to talk to you about something. About us. About the years after the divorce." I was quiet. I know I was not. I know things were not right. With you. During those years. I was so focused on building something new that I did not see what was happening. What you were going through. I sat with that for a moment. "I want to understand it better," he said. "If you are willing to talk about it. I want to understand what those years were like for you." I took a very long breath. Then I said, "I am willing. But Dad, I need you to understand something before we start. This conversation is not going to be comfortable. And I am not going to manage your feelings during it. I am going to tell you the truth of what those years were like and you are going to listen without explaining or defending. Can you do that?" A pause. "Yes," he said. "I can do that." We talked for 3 hours. My mother called me the following April. Robert had been offered a position overseas. A significant opportunity. They were considering it seriously. Then she said, "But before we decide, I need to talk to you about something." I recognized the quality of the pause that followed. "About us," she said. "About after the divorce. About what I should have done differently." I sat down. "Mom," I said. "I have to tell you something." "What?" she said. "Dad called me in October. He asked me the same thing." A very long silence. "He did?" she said finally. "He did," I said. Another silence. "What did you tell him?" she asked. "The truth," I said. "The same thing I am going to tell you." The conversation with my mother was different from the one with my father in its texture but not in its substance. She was more defensive initially. She had more explanations ready. Robert had been a new beginning she had needed. The divorce had been harder on her than anyone knew. She had been surviving. I listened to all of it. Then I said, "Mom, I know you were surviving. I know the divorce was hard. I know Robert was what you needed. I am not disputing any of that. What I am telling you is that while you were surviving, I was also surviving. Alone. At 11. At 13. At 15. And nobody in my life was asking how I was doing it." She was quiet for a long time. "I should have asked," she said finally. "Yes," I said. "You should have." "I am sorry, Simone." "I know," I said. "I believe you." We talked for 2.5 hours. When we were done, she said, "Can I call you more often?" "Not the checking in calls. Real calls." "Yes," I said. "I would like that." I want to tell you something about the months that followed those two conversations. They were not magical. Healing is not magical. It is slow and nonlinear and full of moments where old patterns reassert themselves and you have to choose again to do the harder thing. My father called more often. Sometimes the calls were good, real, present, willing to go beneath the surface. Sometimes he fell back into the cheerful shallowness of 30 years of not going there. When he did, I said gently, "Dad, come back." And he did. My mother called more often too. She was more careful than my father. More precise. Less natural about it. But she was trying in the way of someone who has looked at something clearly for the first time and found it very uncomfortable and is trying anyway. Robert took the overseas position. My mother went with him. She called from overseas more regularly than she had called from 20 minutes away for the previous decade. I continued my work. My practice. My life with Marcus. My friendships. The things I had built while my parents were building their separate lives. I thought often about what it meant that they had both come to me within 7 months of each other asking for the same thing. Not the same words. Not the same circumstances. But the same essential request. See me. Tell me what I missed. Help me understand what I did not understand when it mattered. I am a family therapist. I spend my professional life sitting with people who are trying to repair things that were broken earlier than they knew. I understand better than most that these requests rarely come from nowhere. They come from something shifting in the person asking. A diagnosis. A move. A confrontation with mortality or change that makes the unfinished business of the past suddenly impossible to continue ignoring. Donna's diagnosis had shifted something in my father. Robert's opportunity had shifted something in my mother. And both of them, in the middle of their own shifts, had turned toward the child they had left sitting at a kitchen table in March 25 years earlier. I was glad they turned. I want to be honest about that. I was glad. Not because I had been waiting for it, I had genuinely stopped waiting for it sometime in my mid-20s. but because there is something in being turned toward after a long time of being turned away from that matters regardless of when it arrives. My father came to visit me in Durham last spring. First time he had ever come to my city. First time he had ever seen my home. He walked through the rooms slowly. He looked at the bookshelves and the art on the walls and the small details of a life I had built entirely on my own. He sat at my kitchen table and had coffee with me and Marcus and was present in a way he had not been when I was 11. Before he left, he stood in the hallway and looked at me. "You built something real," he said. "Without much help from me." "I built it," I said. "But I would have liked the help." He nodded. The nod of a man receiving something he knew he had earned. "I know," he said. "I am sorry I was not there to give it." I hugged him. It was the first time in 30 years that a hug from my father felt like something real rather than something performed. My mother visited 6 months later with Robert. She walked through the same rooms. She sat at the same kitchen table. She asked real questions about my work, about Marcus, about the practice. Before she left, she held my hands in the hallway and said, "You are extraordinary." I do not say that enough. You are extraordinary, and I am sorry I did not say it when saying it would have cost me something. I looked at her for a long moment. "You are saying it now," I said. "That is not nothing." She smiled. Wet eyes. Real smile. "No," she said. "It is not nothing." It has been 2 years since those conversations. My father calls every week now. Sometimes twice. The calls are not always deep. Sometimes they are just two people checking in on each other. But they are real. They are chosen. They are not obligation. My mother emails more than she calls. It suits her better, the written word, the time to think before she speaks. The emails are thoughtful. She asks questions and waits for answers. She responds to what I actually say rather than to what she expected me to say. Robert took the overseas position for a year. They are back now. My mother and I have had dinner twice since they returned. Real dinners. Long ones. I think about that kitchen table in March sometimes. The cracked corner. The blue cardigan. The overhead light that was too bright. I think about what it would have meant to the 11-year-old sitting at that table if someone had told her that 25 years later both of her parents would come back. Not because they had to. Because something in their own lives had finally made the unfinished business of hers impossible to ignore any longer. I would have told her to wait. To build her life in the meantime. To not make waiting the thing she organized herself around. And then I would have told her that the wait would be worth it. Not because it fixed everything. It did not fix everything. There are still moments when old patterns surface and old wounds make themselves known. Healing is not a destination. It is a practice. But it was worth it. She was worth waiting for. Both of them. And I was worth coming back to. That last part took me the longest to believe. It is the most important thing I have learned. Before you go, I want to ask you something. Have you ever been the child in a room where the adults were so busy with their own lives that they forgot you were still in it? Have you ever had to build yourself largely alone because the people who were supposed to help build you were building other things? And have you ever had someone come back, really come back, and understood that it mattered even if it was late? Drop the word table in the comments if this story reached something real in you. And if you are new here, subscribe. Every single day I share a new story about family, about truth, and about the people who find their way back to each other. I will see you in the next one. Kayla's Dark Truth.